This passage is about linguistics. The author discusses two theories, Humboldt's and Chomsky's, and his comments on it. Let's quickly summarize the passage. And so too with the pseudo-scientific origins, pseudo means false, of what I consider to be a properly scientific field of inquiry on linguistic relativity. Linguistic relativity as a scientific claim developed in the context of the encounter between Europeans and Americas and with Africa in a time of settler colonialism and imperial race science. So this field of inquiry, he said, it started as has a pseudo-scientific origin. Has a pseudo-scientific origin. What does he say? He says linguistic relativity as a scientific claim developed in the context of the encounter, the interaction between Europeans and the Americas with Africa. So you have certain languages of Africa and Europe and America. So when there were encounters between the Europe and Americas with Africa, that is the time when it developed. In a time of settler colonialism and imperial race science. Now, this encounter happened during which time? Not when all were happy and independent, during a time of settler colonialism and imperial race science. That is when the origins of this linguistic relativity, as a scientific claim started. Although mine is not a systematic excavation of the intellectual history of linguistic relativity, it seems fairly plain that it emerged in conversation with views about primitive people versus civilized people. He says, I'm not really going into a systematic excavation of intellectual habit, but I suspect that this started as a discussion between primitive people and so-called civilized people, capturing the notion that primitive people were primitive because they spoke primitive languages. So what was the basis of calling people primitive? They spoke primitive languages, and those who spoke other languages were considered civilized people. The passage reads slightly difficult. In an exam, you may not have time for it, but you can at least answer 2 out of 4 questions if you summarize it properly, which is what we're trying to do. One important intellectual figure in the development of pseudoscience of linguistics, he says one important figure in the development of the science of linguistics, and there in brackets he says pseudoscience of linguistics. So he believes that this important individual who helped in the development of linguistics was also had a pseudo-scientific approach, not a proper scientific approach, was Wilhelm Humboldt, or a German linguist who made important discoveries about languages. He put forward a theory that language is a human universal. Every human being has a language. So it's a human universal. It is the organ that makes thought possible. It's the language that makes our thought possible. Reality exists outside our thoughts, but it's only through language that we are able to translate the world out there into thought. All right. So language is what makes thought possible. You see a real thing, but it is only through language that real thing is translated into thought, through language. And because languages vary, it must follow that languages produce different thought systems and will naturally vary across linguistic communities. So what did he say? Language is what makes thought possible. The reality is outside, but it is only through language that reality is transformed into thought. Since languages vary, it naturally follows that languages produce different thought systems. Naturally, thought systems vary across linguistic communities. Clear so far? This is not an inherently racist position. So he gave an idea that language is there, thought is there. Through language, reality becomes a thought. So languages vary because languages vary, thought systems vary. This inherently by itself is not a racist position. The idea that thought is only possible through language is straight Wittgenstein. But such a position is easily imported into a pseudo-scientific racial worldview as a way to justify a view of certain languages as inherently superior to others. Humboldt's theory by itself is not racist, but it could become racist. How? By interpreting it into a pseudo scientific racist worldview to justify a view. This theory could be used to justify the view that certain languages are superior to others, which is not according to the author. But Humboldt's view can be interpreted, can be manipulated to support the view that some languages are superior to others, better suited to scientific reasoning or logical exposition than others. That some languages are superior to others, better suited to scientific reasoning than others, better suited to logical exposition than others. Guess which languages were considered the best for logic and science? Obviously, European languages, American languages, the language of the Americas. It can also be used to justify the act of creating modern or civilized people by raising them with a modern or civilized language. Can be this Humboldt's theory can also be used to justify the act of creating modern civilized people through the use of modern or civilized language. It is not hard to see how linguistic relativity might be used to argue that an Anishinaabe child can be made into a proper Canadian by replacing their Ojibwe thoughts into English thoughts. You take a Native American, a Native Canadian, an Aborigine Canadian, an Aborigine, a native dweller of Canada, and you can argue that I can change him into a proper Canadian by replacing his native language into English thoughts. So that's a very racist way of looking at languages. This period in the intellectual history of linguistics and anthropology is endlessly fascinating. He says this period of the intellectual history of linguistics and anthropology is endlessly fascinating. Boas, Sapir, Bloomfield, and others built linguistics and anthropology alongside one another. So much of making anthropology in America was the task of learning and classifying the languages of the Americas. They worked both with and against Saussure and European structuralists like Levi Strauss. The lineages are complex, and it is sometimes hard to figure out who disagrees with whom about what exactly. The arbitrariness of the sign unites basically everyone, but from there, it just about anything goes. In any case, this is as far as Humboldt and his theory are concerned and how linguistics developed in the Americas and classifying the languages in Americas. In any case, by 1950, Noam Chomsky took linguistics to a new direction by postulating a universal grammar inherent to all human languages. Noam Chomsky in 50 said that there is every language, there is universal grammar. The grammar of all languages is universal. Okay, so he said that universal grammar is inherent to all human languages, reformulating the problem as to explain the diversity of human languages from the postulated common linguistic capacities that all humans possess. The limitless generativity of human languages suggests that we all possess some common ability to think through languages. He says the creativity, the generativity of human languages shows all human beings are capable of going through they have some ability to think through languages. So all human beings have that ability to think. It's not like certain languages have that ability and certain don't. All. In the now standard view, the null hypothesis is that languages vary. The main hypothesis is that languages vary, but their phonological inventories, syntactic structures, semantic distinctions, conversational pragmatics do not affect human cognition. Languages may vary in syntax and semantics, but they don't affect human cognition. They don't affect human thinking, thought processes. So he went directly against what Humboldt said. Which of the following best describes Chomsky's views on linguistics? Variations in language do not have a bearing on human intelligence. What does Chomsky say? Variations in grammar do not have a bearing on human cognition, awareness, or thought process. Doesn't say anything about intelligence. So this is not correct. All languages have a similar grammatical structure. The passage, he says something about grammatical structure. What did he say? Let's go back. Okay. The answer option said all human languages have a similar grammatical structure. That's what we're looking at. Chomsky postulated a universal grammar inherent to human languages. All human languages have an inherent common grammar, universal grammar. But human language, the diversity of human language is because of the common linguistic capacity that humans possess. Language is diverse because of the common linguistic capacities that all human beings possess. All right. Then he says all human beings. What does he mean by universal grammar? All human beings possess the common ability to think through language. That is what he means by universal grammar. But he doesn't say they have a similar grammatical structure. What did he say? He says that languages can change, can vary in terms of phonological inventory, syntactic structure, which is nothing but grammatical structure, or semantic distinctions. Okay. But so these are different. It's not the grammatical structure. The universal grammar that Chomsky is talking about is the ability to think through language. Therefore, this is also wrong. He does not say they have a similar grammatical structure. Universal grammar he is referring to is the common ability to think through language. They differ in grammatical structure, semantics, syntax, arrangement of words to form a coherent sentence. They differ in all this. But the ability that is common is the ability to think through language. So this is not correct. People of all communities have the common ability to think through language. Yes, that's what he meant. Differences in language. No, people of all communities have the common ability to be able to think through language is actually wrong. He doesn't talk about people of all communities. Sorry. He talks about people of all languages, all people, not people of all communities. All right. He says that different languages, people have the ability to think through language. All languages indicate this. It's not people of all communities. Okay? Differences in language do not affect human learning capabilities. That is what he said. All right? So the correct answer is D.